10 days in history that changed the world. June 22nd to July 1st, 1941, when the war became extermination, the German invasion of the Soviet Union. To understand this episode fully, you must understand two things. Number one, the pact between the nations, and second, the name of the invasion. Without those two pieces, June 22nd, 1941 looks like betrayal. But with these two pieces of information, it looks like inevitability. In August 1939, Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union signed the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. Publicly, it was a promise of peace between ideological enemies. Privately, it was a blueprint for division. Eastern Europe was carved up in secret. They had plans to split Poland before it was even invaded. They had plans to give the Baltic states to the Soviet Union. They had redrawn borders in ink long before they were ever redrawn in blood. For nearly 2 years, the pact held strong. Germany went ahead and conquered the West, Poland, Norway, France, and the Soviet Union absorbed territory in the East. But this pact was never about trust. This pact was about timing. Stalin had believed he had bought security, and Hitler believed he bought freedom to strike the West before turning his army east. Both knew the agreement would die, but only one of them chose the date. When the invasion began, it was called Operation Barbarossa. They could have called it the Eastern Campaign or the Red Offensive, but they chose Barbarossa. This is important because the name comes from Frederick Barbarossa, a 12th century Holy Roman Emperor. In German legend, Barbarossa sleeps beneath a mountain, waiting to rise and restore German greatness. The Nazis were completely obsessed with myth, destiny, and by choosing that name, Hitler framed the invasion as historic and righteous and inevitable. This was not presented as a conquest. It was presented as a crusade. And that word matters. Words matter because crusades do not treat enemies as equals. They treat enemies as obstacles that need to be removed. June 22nd, 1941, German artillery opened fire across nearly 2,000 miles. It was the largest invasion in human history. 3 million Axis troops surged to the east. Thousands of aircraft struck Soviet airfields long before dawn. Entire Soviet air fleets were destroyed on the ground. Command had lapsed almost instantly. Many Soviet soldiers did not even know the war had begun until the bombs were already falling. The pact was dead, and the German myth was in motion. German armored spearheads moved with terrifying speed. The Blitzkrieg, the lightning war. They did not push gradually. They pierced. They surrounded. Entire Soviet divisions were encircled within days. Tens of thousands of soldiers were trapped without supplies. That number turned into hundreds of thousands. Confusion reigned in the Soviet command. They were confused. Retreat orders were delayed. Some units were ordered to stand and fight until they were annihilated. To the outside world, it appeared the Soviet Union might collapse within weeks, and that was unfathomable. But something else began in these first days, something darker than battlefield defeat. It was the War of Annihilation. Operation Barbarossa was not designed to be a conventional war. It was built on ideology. Before the invasion began, German officers were briefed on what they called, quote, war of extermination. Political commissars were to be executed immediately. Jewish civilians were to be targeted. Behind the army came special units, the Einsatzgruppen, also known as the SS. Their mission is not militarily. Their mission is systematic murder. As German forces moved through Lithuania, Latvia, Belarus, and Ukraine, Jewish communities were rounded up. The men were separated first, and then the women, and then the children. They were marched into forests, ravines, empty fields, and they were shot. These were not spontaneous acts. They were organized. They were planned. Local collaborators were even sometimes recruited to help. Civil authorities were often sidelined. There was nothing they could do about it. And the killings began within days of the invasion. Not months, but days. A young Lithuanian witness later recalled, they told the men to bring shovels. We thought they were building something. Then we heard the shots, and then we understood. There were no camps. Not yet, not in these early days. There were no factories of death. There was only rifles and pits full of people, dead people, and then silence afterward. While the mass shootings began, the German army continued advancing. Huge pockets of Soviets were trapped near Minsk. The numbers were staggering. The world had never seen encirclements on this scale. But the brutality was not limited to the battlefield. Entire villages were burned under suspicion of aiding resistance. Food supplies were seized without compensation. Civilians were left to starve as supply lines prioritized German forces. The invasion plan, don't get it wrong, included a starvation strategy. German leadership understood that millions of Soviet civilians would die if food was redirected to the Reich. They accepted this. The war in the East was not about surrender terms. It was about reducing populations, period. By July 1st, 1941, the scale of destruction was undeniable. Entire Soviet armies had vanished. They were just gone. Mass graves were already being dug. The illusion that this was a traditional war had completely evaporated. Even some German soldiers wrote home in complete disbelief. One wrote, "We were told this would be different from France." And it is. There are no rules here. That sentence captures the transformation. This was no longer a war between states. It was a war against people. These 10 days did 3 irreversible things. Number 1, they opened the Eastern Front, which would become the deadliest theater of World War II. Number 2, they accelerated the Holocaust from discrimination into systematic mass killing. And number 3, they ensured the war would not end quickly. The Soviet Union did not collapse. It completely absorbed the blow. And over the next 4 years, the Eastern Front would consume tens of millions of lives. Operation Barbarossa did not bring Germany victory. In an ironic twist, it brought Germany destruction. Every war begins with strategy, but some wars lose limits. Between June 22nd and July 1st, 1941, World War II crossed that line. The pact had been deception. The name had been mythology. And the reality was annihilation. These 10 days changed not just the direction of the war, but the war's nature was changed forever. And once war becomes a war of extermination, there is no easy way back. Sometimes 10 days do not just change borders. They change what humanity proves it is capable of. This is historical, and these are history stories that refuse to be forgotten.